Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to this Lighthouse Group webinar. I'm just going to give it another 30 seconds or so, so that we start on time and give everyone a chance. So we're just a minute early. So just check that you can hear me loud and clear. I guess that's the most important bit. Secondly, that you can see me, less important. And third, that you can see a slide. How to get your team to do what needs to be done and do it right. There's a bold statement, especially in the 40 minutes or so that we have, or I have. But hopefully some thoughts and ideas on how do we get individuals, teams to do what needs to be done and hopefully do it right. So as I say, in about 30 seconds or so, I will kick off with just a brief introduction, and then we can kick into the subject. In fact, why not? Let's kick off now. So welcome everybody, formally. I hope all is well. You're enjoying a good day. The sun is shining and it's lunchtime-ish. So if there's a chance to kind of sit and eat your lunch while I chat away to you, then enjoy. We have a chat box. Feel free to use a chat box. There's quite a few people here, so in terms of questions, I won't necessarily be able to answer any particular specific questions, but thoughts and comments are good, and any questions you do raise, I'm sure we can get back to you, or we'll get back to you with some thoughts and answers necessary, so do use the chat box. Otherwise, settle in and let me kind of take you through some thoughts, some ideas, tools, maybe techniques in how to get your team to do what needs to be done and do it right. In terms of an introduction, my name is David Allen. I am a facilitator, trainer, coach for the Lighthouse Group, who I'm sure many of you know work closely with the CITB on lots of courses. I've run many of these courses over the past few years. And today really is a bit of a kind of bring together of some of the key subjects that I spend a lot of time talking about based on questions that a lot of people ask. My background is a psychologist, first and foremost, I guess. So I've worked for almost 40 years now within organisations and then externally to organisations, as I say, as a trainer, facilitator, coach, consultant. Starting off, as you can see down at the bottom there with Costain from a construction point of view, then went out to the Middle East, Dubai, and worked there, and then worked in Kuwait with the Kuwait Fund, manufacturing, engineering, architectural government organisation. So I've got a reasonable amount of experience of the industry. I'm also got a background in sports and what they call positive psychology these days. Positive psychology, normal psychology, kind of what's wrong with people. Positive psychology, what's good, what's right. Let's work on strengths. Let's work on focus on what is working and who is working well. I think it's a very important concept. All with this aim, as you can see there, with kind of high performance at work. So what do I do? High performance at work. How do we get high performing organizations? How do we get everyone pulling together in the same direction? How can we get teams together to make sure that they are high performing teams, and of course high performing individuals. I'm just checking on the chat box. I'm looking for some thumbs up here, everybody, that you can hear me loud and clear. I've just noticed in the chat box that maybe someone can't. I'm not sure if that's an individual issue or everyone's got it. So as long as, give me some thumbs up, folks, if you can hear me a-okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, most of you can. Good. That's okay. I think it's just one or two issues. We've got some guys in the background who might be able to help you. So they'll keep an eye on the chat box in case there are any technological issues, etc. Otherwise, I shall go bowling ahead, if that's okay, unless someone shouts and stops me. So that's just a quick introduction to me and what I do. I've been running these CITB courses for a few years now. And I guess the common issue often on these things is what we might term as poor performance. So I thought here is a place to start. As someone who deals in high performance, often where you start from is poor performance or lower than desired performance. And there's a few reasons for that, and I thought I'd map a couple of things down in terms of kind of why people don't perform well in general. No surprises here. First and foremost, they just don't know how to. So typically a training issue or a learning. Now, whether that's based on we recruit potential rather than talent, and so we don't know that they're going to be able to do a job. Thus, we need to train, develop, coach, do whatever is necessary to get them to a place where they have the skills, knowledge, expertise to do the job correctly. So there's a good place to start, is do they know how to perform? Then point number two often is they just don't know that they're not performing. They kind of think they are because no one's really told them. So feedback would be the obvious word to stick in here. Are they getting feedback? I think sometimes the idea that people should know that they're not performing, that they should be able to read the signs or the signals, is a bit misguided. Sometimes we need to be pretty explicit. So formal feedback or kind of ongoing feedback, rather than just once a year, I'm going to give you some feedback via an appraisal. Obviously, constant feedback on what's expected and what's desired levels of expectation is key to ensure that people know that they are not performing. We kind of have to throw capability in here. So capability is kind of this area that says, well, we've trained them and we've offered feedback and we've kind of monitored the process here, but we still don't believe they're capable. Now, before we go any further, I'm a great believer that everyone has the potential to perform. That's not necessarily the question. The question is whether they have the potential to perform the jobs that they're being asked to do within the timeframes, to the level of quality, within the budgets, etc., etc. And that's the call that we often have to make in terms of capability, that says, well, they may well be highly capable at some time in the future, but they're not capable now. And that's what we need. So there are considerations then to moving people into slightly different roles, getting them to do slightly different jobs, etc., etc. And then I've got our fourth one, just choosing not to. There's 1,000 reasons, and we'll dig into some of those reasons the next half an hour or so, in terms of kind of why people would choose not to perform. So let's see where we go with some of these. In terms of common issues, there is then, I guess, the most commonly asked question. So if I did kind of try to boil it down and go, okay, what is the one thing that most people ask in some kind of form? It's how do I get someone to do what I want them to do, or to do what I say, or to do what needs to be done, or to do it right, or to do it without argument, or just to do something. How do I get someone? They should know what to do, but they're not doing it, etc., etc. So this kind of ties in very closely with people choosing not to perform, perhaps. But how do we get someone, whether it's your kids, or whether it's your partners, and particularly whether it's your colleagues and team members, how the heck do you get them to do what you believe needs to be done, or what the company says has to be done, or you just want them to do? Because high performance is what it's all about. So if we just kind of start on this high performance bit that says we need people to do things in the workplace so that we can get a performance out of them. An organization needs to be a high performing, or needs high performance, because that's the way it succeeds in business, how it makes its money, that's how it gains new customers, that's how it survives. So high performance is a really important concept. And if we broke that down, then we could say that performance within itself is just the actual process of performing a task or function. So people perform tasks and functions at work all the time. That doesn't necessarily make that high performance, because obviously they could perform them to a standard that is below what is required. Thus, high performance is the actual process of performing a task or function successfully, which can be determined as in a most efficient or effective way. So when we start talking about successfully, we start talking about goals, objectives. We'll come on to that in a moment or two. We need to kind of put the standard in place. Then we can measure whether someone has achieved it. Don't start me on overperformance and going above and beyond. I often see those in appraisals. Not a fan. High performance is hitting objectives. The game is about setting good, challenging, stretching objectives and constantly monitoring those and adapting those to fit. Different subject for a different day. A high performer is not someone who just hits high performance once, it's someone who consistently hits high performance. So consistency is a key word when we talk about high performance. And I guess the only other thing to say at this stage of the game in regard to high performers consistently achieve goals is you only get that degree of consistency through what I would call well-being. So people need to feel valued, that they're adding value. They need to feel organization, they need to feel engaged in the organization, motivated, etc. So employee well-being, as most of us know these days, is an extremely important part of workplace performance. Not just because it's a nice to have, it's an essential to have. So if we're going to talk high performance, then we need to talk about hitting goals. We also need to talk about well-being. So there's essentially a two-pronged approach. And that two-pronged approach can be termed in this way. We need structure, process, and we need influence. We need to have a relationship with people where people, as I've said before, are motivated, are engaged. We could term it in other terminology, which we could call management and leadership. You need both management and leadership in any organization to gain high performance. Which begs the question, what's the difference? What is management as opposed to leadership, of which most of you will be able to scream out very clear answers, and I'm sure you know. But let's just clarify. Management, an easy definition of management, is the process of achieving objectives. The process of achieving objectives. Management is a process. I'll give you a process in a second or two because it's absolutely key to high performance in getting people to do what we want. So management is that one side, that structured side of things, and that has to be in place. There is an argument to say that that might suffice alone. Many organizations rely on good management. And there's an argument to say that we don't even need leadership if we have good management in place, good structure, good process, where people have clarity about what they're doing and how they're doing it. There is a word that would probably describe simply why we need leadership these days, and that word is change. It's all very well and good to have good management in place, but as you well know, the world is constantly changing, everything is constantly changing, and thus where there is change, there is a breaking of process, of structure. There is a doubt as to whether the structure and process is going to work. So where there is any kind of doubt or any kind of breaking in the management chain, people don't tend to look, rather than at the process, at the people, thus leadership. So when times are uncertain, people look to other people, they look to their leaders to show them the way, to give them the new process. So leadership is a relationship whereby, one, the leader influences the actions, the thoughts, the actions, the behaviors of other people, which is necessary in change. And given that change is constant, is constantly necessary. So there's always this balance between management and leadership, but they're very different things. For me, where does it start? It starts with management. I think too often we spend too much time on the leadership bit without good management in place. We wonder why leadership doesn't really work. It doesn't work because there's a lack of management. Always that process, that structure needs to be in place or being worked upon to be able to put in place. From good management comes good leadership. When there is good management in place, we can focus on good leadership so that when there isn't good structure in place, the leadership is already there and people will trust and they will follow. So how do we get people to do what we want? Well, we start with good process. We start with good structure. Put that in place, then we can build from there. So if we talk about management and management process, we can break management into three things, quite simply, or three stages. Step number one, and we'll go through these steps, briefly in a minute or two in a little bit more depth. But step number one clarify the objective. So if management is the process, step number one of the process is to clarify your objective, or to have any objective clarified for you. Whether you are the manager or not, management still needs to exist. So somewhere down the line, whatever your role, you need objectives. So you need to set your own, or you need to have clarity from someone who's setting objectives for you. Whether we talk about managing people or managing self, by the way, it's the same thing. So from clarity objective, we get to kind of point two, which I would suggest is the essence of management. Management is about planning. Planning the utilization of resource. Tactical planning, the utilization of resource that you have, perhaps in the short term. Strategic planning, the resource that you may require in the long term. But this is where the kind of money is earned in my book in terms of management, is putting together a plan, understanding what resources you have or what you'll need, your time, your money, your technology, your people, to be able to then see that the objective is possible. Ideally, a plan should be a visible thing that you and or others can see, that will show you, to all intents and purposes, that you can achieve your objective. Because if not, then you've got two options here. Number one, change the plan. Number two, change the objective. Because what you can't do, but what I see all the time, is we still go bowling on anyway to stage 3. We either then do it, self-management, do it ourselves. In management terms, we talk about delegation. And in project management terms, often we talk about facilitation. The difference we'll talk about in a moment or two. But there's your process. Clarify objective, plan to meet your objective, do, delegate, facilitate the plan. Let's just have a quick word on objectives and objective setting, because there are many different ways that we can set objectives. So my challenge to you folks, you can use your chat box if you like, is to work all those ones out. Some of those I'm sure you are very familiar with, others perhaps not so. No cheating. This is not a ChatGPT co-pilot test. We can all do that. But let's see if anyone can get all of those ways of setting objectives. The most commonly, I'm sure you'll recognize, are SMART, and we can also probably include KPIs in that. We're not going to go through these, of course, in terms of the models, but the idea is, okay, I can see BHAGs in there. Thank you, Mandy, on that. The idea is there clarity? Do you, as a manager, set clear goals? Do you, as an employee, a team member, have clear goals? Clarity, be able to see crystal clear what needs to be done and how that relates then to bigger goals. It's like a pyramid, isn't it? Everybody should have objectives. All those objectives should link and align across, up and down towards that bigger goal. That's a really difficult thing to do. So the biggest problem traditionally was always we set objectives and then a year later we have an annual appraisal where those objectives have been gotten or surpassed, etc., etc. I think we're much better these days. We need to be constantly reviewing objectives to make sure they're stretching, to make sure people have them, and to make sure that we're going to attain them. So clarity of objective is absolutely key, and there's a real skill, I would suggest, in setting clear objectives. As I've said, planning the utilization of resource. So do you know what resource you have? Now, whether that's finance, whether that's technology, whatever that might be, in particular, people, that takes time. So I would suggest that a lot of the time is we don't take the time because we don't believe we have the time to plan effectively. And therein lies the problem, of course. If you do not have a plan, then you're relying on half a plan, if that you're then passing down to people. And then we kind of end up this loop of right, come on guys, we're going to motivate you to work harder, to work faster, to get a job done. Don't have much of a plan, but it's got to happen. Okay, I get that you may be inspiring, and I might want to follow you, but for how long? And this is the consistency bit. We can get short-term high performance, but we're not going to get long-term performance without a good plan in place. I'm teaching you the psychics, I'm sure, preaching to the converted, but it is key part of the management process. So that we can then move to that delegation phase. So delegation is an area I spend quite a lot of time on in CITB workshops. There's lots of the programs where delegation shows itself as part of the process. I mentioned delegation and facilitation. I would suggest that facilitation is where you don't have line management authority over people, but you still need people to do a job with you or for you, as opposed to delegation, where you do have line management authority and you're able to pass a task down. But isn't that allocation? So I think often that there is a confusion between what is allocation and what is delegation. Whether it matters or not, we'll see. But I would suggest that allocation is where it is very clearly someone's role that is clearly defined, and it is their task that you're just giving to them. They know it's their task because it's part of the job description, it's part of conversations, it's something that is consistently happening. So you are allocating a task to someone that is their task to do. As opposed to delegation officially, which is your task to do. So you delegate when you are passing down a task that is formally yours, that you need someone else to do it, or you want someone else to do it. Need might be because you are time pressed or you've got other priorities. There may be many reasons why you need to pass a task to someone else. Therefore, you delegate what is formally yours to them and get them to do it. Or you want them to do it. So the other side of delegation, because there's kind of two sides of the coin here and there's give and take, is because there's a benefit in it from them and you want them to do it because essentially it will help them progress. It will help them learn, it will help them develop, it will put them in place where perhaps they're up for some kind of promotion or pay rise, etc., etc. There needs to be a benefit. So we tend to delegate when we have tasks that we need or want to push down or to send out to others. It doesn't necessarily have to be down. You can delegate up and you can delegate across. Empowerment, slightly different. Empowerment is probably something that was talked about a lot, but whether we do it a lot or can do it is another question. Empowerment really is giving a task to someone with full accountability. So they have the responsibility and the accountability for fulfilling that task. It is essentially theirs. Delegation, ultimately, it is still part of your role, so you are still ultimately accountable for the outcome. Empowerment, you no longer are. It's yours, it's theirs, no longer anything to do with me. Empowerment may be a long-term result of delegation where someone eventually picks it up and takes it over, but it's not something we kind of just tend to do in the moment. You are empowered. No, generally you're not empowered, you're delegated to. I am still accountable. And then finally, abdication is something that we see less and less of these days, because of course we're all responsible managers here. Abdication, throwing something at someone. Delegation without the why, just throwing something at someone. It's not part of their job necessarily, it's part of your job, but there's no in it for them. You're just getting rid of it because you can't cope. Abdication, there has to be a benefit and a why to make it delegation. Subtle differences, you can decide how important they are to you. But I would suggest from the receiving end, then really important. I need to know what tasks I'm going to be allocated as part of my job. But I also would like delegation in most cases, or certainly to have the choice and to understand why I'm being delegated to. Delegation, by the way, is part of the process. Clarify the objective, plan to meet the objective, delegate the plan. Part of the management process, delegation process, essentially is a 4, 5, 3-step process. Starts with communication of the plan. Here is the plan. I am asking you to do this because I need you to do it. I would like you to do it, etc., etc. But there needs to be communication of the plan. And the motivation essentially is the why, the reasoning behind it. we'll talk more in a minute too about motivation. But you in management might leave motivation out. Management just might go communicate, monitor, review. But I'm starting to think that starts to move a little bit more towards abdication than delegation. So I think the motivation is important, is to want people to want to do it and have a drive to do it. We could even argue the monitoring bit. I would suggest any good delegation needs a monitoring process. If not, that's high risk. So potentially, if it's part of training or development, you may just communicate, motivate, and review. You could even just communicate and review. I see that a lot. But monitoring, supervising, checking, all of those words might fit in that box there. There needs to be some kind of keeping an eye on the process, because you're not abdicating, you're delegating, to ensure that it's going well and we don't fail, or we're able to stop it if it is. And then, of course, a degree of review. So that review is kind of how it went, maybe offering some feedback, checking in on the results, of which then, we kind of go through this loop, because either it's been successful, well, great. If we have some kind of success, then we can move forward to the next objective. If we've had a degree of failure, we can go carry a process on. Either we then go down the development route, is what have we learned and how we then get it better next time, or potentially we go down the discipline route. Go back to our reasons why people don't perform, because they've chosen not to do something, then potentially there's disciplinary routes. Either way, it's a management process. We're just following a process. So having a clear management process that you follow, that you understand, and that others are able to follow and understand is absolutely key to high performance and key to getting people to do what we want, because people understand the what and the why. I would suggest that most people, if they have a clear objective, a good plan, and are delegated to, would be happy. If they could turn up, do their day's work, and go home again consistently and get paid a good, a fair day's pay, what do we need to worry about things like motivation? They will be motivated. Maybe. So we talk management process, but the other side of the coin is leadership, because things change, and of course because humans are humans. So I just thought I would talk about the human element for a minute or two. Some of you may have come across the book of Mind Management, a guy called Professor Steve Peters, a performance coach, very famous for working with British cycling and things like English rugby and Liverpool Football Club, to name a few. But he wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Chimp Paradox, which is a really nice, simple way of the basis of the book is around emotional regulation. Managing your chimp is around controlling emotions. But it's actually broader than that. And it's a really nice model just to kind of begin to understand how the human brain works, and thus how humans work. And if we're interested in leadership, we kind of need to understand humans, because it's about relationships. Remember, leadership is about the relationship where we influence the thoughts, actions, behaviors of others. So to begin to understand why people do what they do, we could look at this brain. The three areas of the brain: the parietal system, the frontal lobe, and the limbic system. I'm going to do this really quickly, and there's a lot of depth to it, of course, but it might give you an idea. The parietal system, in the book, is termed as the computer. The computer is the storage system. Your storage system stores every single experience that you've ever had. It determines who you are, because every experience you have is who you are, and that's just your computer then replaying all the time your experiences, your learnt experience, which then forms your behavior. So most people behave in the way they behave based on habit, based on what they have learned to do, consciously and unconsciously. So when you're trying to get people to do things differently or do things better, one of the things you're often fighting against, of course, is people's habits. Habits are there to keep people safe. So they are habits for good reason, according to individuals. That's a really important concept. So we have to understand that people are hardwired to a great degree, because of their previous experience, to do things in a particular way. And if you're asking them to do something different, or working out why they're not doing what you want them to do or think they should be doing, it's because consciously or unconsciously, that goes against what they have learned. Secondly, you have the frontal lobe. So the frontal lobe is the logic system. So the logic system helps us reprogram the computer with logic. So this is the management bit again. So one of the ways to start changing behaviors and start to changing thinking processes and getting people to do what you want is to start working with the frontal lobe, which is start to apply logic. And that's to say where the management bit comes in. Clear objectives, clear plans, logic, ABC, 1, 2, 3. Frontal lobe gets that, and then it can start to work and to start to reprogram. So dealing with logic, dealing with facts, dealing with objectivity is always a really good place to start when you're trying to get people to do what you want and what you need. But then we have a limbic system. Limbic system, the chimp, is extremely powerful. It's more powerful, much more powerful than the frontal lobe. Your emotions are more powerful than logic. So herein lies a problem sometimes, is where the chimp, the emotional brain, is determining actions because it's more powerful than the frontal lobe. The limbic system, the chimp, one function only, survival. The frontal lobe has developed to be able to kind of operate in this modern world. The chimp hasn't. The chimp still is absolutely based on the basic fight-flight response. So anything that happens that sits outside of the parietal system, our experience, any new experience, is open for the limbic system, the chimp, to take charge and essentially to send us into a degree of panic, anxiety, stress, worry, etc. The way to overcome that, without going to great depth, is again going to the frontal lobe, is going to logic, etc. So whichever way we go, we're still going back to this kind of start point of working with fact, data, logic, process. But as I said several times here, that's not enough. That limbic system still needs to have its place. So we still need to relate to the chimp. We still need to be able to relate emotionally with people. And as many of you will know, that if you're able to do that, that's the leadership bit. That is the bit where you start to get real buy-in from people. The consistent buy-in. They'll do a job once, but whether they'll do it consistently won't actually rely on the frontal lobe, but it rely much more on the limbic system. The limbic system is based on trust that they're doing the right thing. It's aligned with values. It's aligned with beliefs. All that sits within the limbic system. That is the realm of leadership. So whilst the frontal lobe is fantastic for reprogramming to a certain degree, where it's our start point, we then, from a leadership point of view, need to be working with the limbic system, the emotional center. Oops, there's some little arrows to point the way that I should have done. So when we start talking about leadership, when we start talking about limbic system, when we start talking about emotions, then the word motivation often comes. So I just want to dig into the word motivation for a moment or two. But if we're going to have a chat about motivation, we also need to have a chat around other words such as morale and engagement. A very common discussion is the difference between motivation and morale. And sometimes a bit of a mistake we make is that we put them in the same box. As I'll describe in a moment or two, motivation is a drive. Motivation is the drive towards something, a goal. So back to our goal orientation. So having clear goals is really important, but also a drive away from something. In simple terms, fear, what I don't want, what I don't like. Chimp, emotions. So often, again, we can understand forward motivation, logical mind, I want to achieve a goal, and negative or sort of say rear motivation, which is often chimp related based on worry, fear, and moving away from something. But motivation essentially is a drive. That's different to morale, which is, I guess, a sense of well-being, a sense of contentment, a general feeling that things are okay, happy even. So you can have high motivation but low morale. You can have people who are highly motivated to get a job done, to do a good job, to leave a job, and not enjoy it, to not have any morale. I'm going to do a good job, even though I don't enjoy working here. So just because people are motivated doesn't mean that morale is good. And to keep having that, you're almost certainly going to fall into this peaks and trough of performance. You won't get that degree of consistency. You need morale to add that level of consistency again. So morale is slightly different. That sense of well-being, that sense of contentment, that sense of kind of happiness. But you can also have high morale with low motivation. So you can have a great place to work and a great team and good people. You're not getting anywhere. You're not doing anything. You're not achieving anything. So you need both. Often what we see is where we have good motivation and good morale, we have good engagement. Engagement can be described in many ways. Sometimes it's described as discretionary effort. For me, engagement is about involvement. It's about feeling part of, wanting to add. Engagement is often about doing stuff I enjoy. It's about doing stuff that I find has meaning, has some kind of benefit. So engagement comes from an alignment of kind of individual goals, objectives, values, and beliefs in line with organizational goals, values, objectives, and beliefs. And that level of alignment is where we get engaged. Engagement is the holy grail of most HR departments, or many HR departments, or talent managers, etc. Is how do we get people engaged in what they do, invested in what they do? You probably need to start with motivation, morale, before we get engagement. In fact, I'll go one step back. I'll say I'll probably start with morale. Morale is a good place to start. Then we can start talking about motivation. And on motivation, here's a bit of a strange slide. It's what I often call the dancing bear. So the question I often ask is it your job? And as I say this, you can feel free in the chat box to kind of go yes or no. Is it your job to motivate your people, whoever your people are? So if you're a company, all your people. Is it your job as a team leader or a supervisor or a manager? Is it your job to motivate your people? To which 9 out of 10 say yes. Okay, I've got a yes and no. I'd love to have the conversation. Unfortunately, yeah. Okay, so we're getting some interesting responses there. Okay, so here we go. 9 out of 10, looking at just what we've got here, say yes. Is it? Let me explain. My motivation in my head is mine. It's not your job to motivate me. It's my job to motivate me. My drive is mine. So I think the idea of a dancing bear is this idea is if you take it as your responsibility to have to motivate your team and all the individuals within your team, that's a big ask. And the problem is, of course, is motivation changes. So this has to be a constant thing. So, to simplify this, it's like saying, okay, it's my job to motivate my team. So today I'm going to say, okay, team, we've got to get the job done. But if we get the job done, we can knock off half an hour early. Fantastic. They're highly motivated. They're driven to do the job, and they do it so that they're able to finish half an hour early. Now, of course, that will set up an expectation. So next day, okay, we're going to do it again. Let's work, get the job done, and we can knock off half an hour early. I mean, how many days before that starts to wear thin? Never mind the question, by the way, that for some people, knocking off early is just not much of a benefit. But let's say it is for most people, but most people are kind of now have the expectation. So half an hour starts to feel like the norm very quick. So I'm expecting 45 minutes or an hour in the first couple of weeks, or I'm expecting you to go and buy me a beer, or I'm expecting you to bring some chocolates in, or I mean, all of a sudden the expectation there from every individual across the team is looking to you to motivate them. And sometimes they'll give you a big thumbs up. Well, boss, good job. And other times they won't. And the days they're not motivated, they are looking firmly to you. I'm not sure that's the way to go. That's like a highway to hell, as far as I'm concerned. That's something that you can't maintain, and something that's completely abdicating any kind of responsibility from their behalf. So I just want you to shift it a little bit. Do not see it as your job to motivate, I suggest. But I would see it as your job to create an environment where people may be motivated. So you can do the things that you think you need to do that may motivate them, but you also have to accept it may not. The most important thing you can do is remind people that their motivation is theirs. You need them motivated, you want them motivated, they are motivated. But ultimately it's theirs. If you really keep leadership point of view, is you can ask the question, help me understand what motivates you. So we sit down with people and we ask the question, what motivates you? To which most reply money, of course. Does that help? Not really. That means you've either got to pay them more money all the time, or we probably need to dig a bit deeper. So we might ask the question, why? Why do you want the money? What's the money going to do? Because it's not money that motivates, it's what the money buys that motivates. I want to go on a nice holiday. Great, okay. That's why we want the money. Or I want to buy a new car, or I want to be able to feed my kids or send them to school, a good school. So understanding why may be useful as a manager as to why then they are motivated towards getting more money. But actually that's not really the answer either, because a holiday or a car or a good school is not what motivates. It's what that gives you, what we term intrinsic drivers. Whether the holiday gives you a sense of fun or freedom or escape, those are the things that start to resonate internally with people. Those are the motivators. That's quite a difficult conversation with a lot of people. Most people don't know themselves what motivates them, and certainly some people are not going to even entertain the conversation to that degree. Let's just leave it at the money, shall we, boss? So I think we've got to be careful, because we could be a slave to motivation. I think we can do a lot more morale, but I think our responsibility, as I say, is to get people to realize that motivation is theirs, and that you can help in many ways. But it's not your job. It's not your responsibility. There's a book written about 10 years ago by a guy called Dan Pink, which defines motivation, drive. And there are, and this is old psychology, by the way, but there are kind of three main things, and the fourth, which is just as main, but he doesn't talk about it quite as much, in terms of, okay, how do I motivate people if motivation is my intention, or what do people need to do to be motivated? So number one is purpose. Well, we can help on that front, can't we? So helping people with clear goals and objectives and an idea of where the organization is going or what a project is trying to achieve, etc., helps people understand the purpose. Understanding people's purpose. So asking the question, why do you work for us? Why do you do the job that you do? Having that kind of conversation to begin to understand the purpose that people have in their heads about their life is absolutely key if we are going to get involved in this kind of motivation conversation. Everyone has a degree of purpose, although we often lose track of that. And without purpose, we often then just get a bit untethered. And that can be quite unhealthy. It's not to say that we all have to have a clear idea all the time of where we're going, but some level of purpose is important from a psychological point of view. And work can really help that. Work gives people purpose. Mastery is another one. So mastery, being good at stuff. So quite simply, being good at stuff is something that motivates us. We all like to be good at stuff. So having the opportunity to demonstrate what you're good at, to be able to produce, so you get delegated to, so that you can then do your task, whatever your specialism, skill, trade is, you can then go and do your task to a high level, and that feels good. That motivates us. And of course, the opportunity to learn new stuff. So where we have the opportunity to learn new skills, and have gain new knowledge, etc. That's a really important part. So any organization, any leader, any manager who's able to help people learn is in a good place. Autonomy is the third one that Dan Pink talks about. Autonomy, tied into delegation, once again, tied into empowerment a little bit. But essentially, to what degree do people have a degree of freedom to do the job that needs to be done, i.e. not micromanaged? So one of the problems we often have in management is letting go, part of the delegation process again. But if you want people to do what you want them to do, you're going to have to get to a point where they're doing it their way. Outcome is still the same, but you can't just keep getting people to do what you want in the way that you want it done, which is exactly the way you would always do it, without any realization that perhaps there's another way. So a degree of autonomy and letting go might be necessary. And if you can get to that place, then you've got people who are invested. And of course, a sense of belonging. So this is what Dan Pink doesn't talk about so much, but traditional psychology will say all the time, is people need to feel part of something. Part of a team. What's the team? Team identity. Part of an organization, part of a job, part of a project. That sense of belonging is really important. Where you can start to get people to come on board with what you want, to do what you need and do it right, is where you've got people who are highly motivated. So one of the things that we can do is create an environment where there is purpose, mastery, autonomy, and belonging. Let me take you to another facet here. What we'll call the PCMI grid. So how do we get people to do what we want? Well, typically we use persuasion. I don't have any problem with persuasion. Persuasion, what's persuasion? Persuasion, what's the word I'm looking for here? Convincing someone, that's the word I'm looking for. So the need to convince someone. The problem with persuasion, I guess, and the problem with convincing is that implies resistance. So people are not doing something, therefore I need to persuade them. And if you are skilled at persuasion, you can convince them to do what you want. So how do you get people to do what you want? Well, you persuade them. How do you persuade them? Well, there's many ways, but essentially the most important thing is to create value. So if I'm going to persuade you to come to the pub with me tonight after work, then you're going, no, don't want to do it. There's a resistance. I might say, okay, then I'll buy you a drink. Or I might say your favorite band is on. All our mates will be there. I'm looking for the value. I'm looking for you then to kind of go, okay, the resistance is now gone because I see better value in your thoughts and your ideas. So the art of persuasion is absolutely critical in getting people to do what you want, but it is a bit of a blunt tool. But it's better than coercion. Coercion by force, by threat. So you will come to the pub with me. Now, I could physically force you perhaps, but generally it's implied, it's psychological, and it's a threat if you don't come with me. Now, I get there might be a time and a place that says if you don't do this job, if you don't do it like this, there will be a negative repercussion. I get that. Is it a long-term positive strategy to get people to do what you want? Not really. There's only going to be one response over a period of time to continual coercion, and that is resistance. Or back to a chimp, fight or flight. They're either going to run away and go somewhere else, or they're going to fight back. They'll either do that overtly, bang in your face, or they'll do it covertly, which is just quietly ignore what you say or just do something different. Coercion, not a great long-term strategy. It's not even a great short-term strategy, probably. So we get clever, don't we? We go to manipulation. Manipulation, the art of getting someone to do what you want without them realizing what you want them to do. Come to the pub with me tonight. I don't have any money. So what I'm going to say is all our friends are going to be there. The beer's on tap that's your favorite, and it's your favorite band. And you go, oh, okay, I'll come. I like that band, and that's my favorite beer. What I don't tell you is I've got no money. I'm expecting you to stand up the drinks. May work, probably will work. Manipulation is a highly effective way of getting people to do what you want. Until they realize, believe, perceive that they have been manipulated. And all of a sudden, game over. Why? because trust is broken. So to manipulate someone is a high risk strategy that may be effective, and it may work in the short term again, but it's almost certainly not going to work in the long term. Not many people that I know like to know or feel that they're being manipulated, even if it's in their best interests. It's like, why don't you just say so? Why did you feel the need to manipulate me? And because you had, I'm not going to trust you again. And I'm not going to trust you about the pub. I'm also not going to trust you about anything else, actually, because I'm going to associate you with distrust. High risk strategy. Which leaves our final one, and a word we used right at the very start. How do you get people to do what you want? You get people to do what you want through influence. I don't even have to ask you to come to the pub with me. I'm going, can I come to the pub? And you're going, can I come too? Influence. The art of consciously, but actually most of the time unconsciously, getting people to follow you. Influence is about followership. Leadership is about followership, which is why influence is about influence and leadership are synonymous. If you can be influential, then people start to do what you want. So this is all about building influence. Persuasion you can do in the moment, coercion you can do in the moment, manipulation you can do in the moment, influence takes time. So this is about taking time. This is about one step at a time. This is about the two things we talked about right at the very start. Helping people follow by providing a map, a structure, a process, clear objectives, plan, and delegation. Allow people to follow that. They will be influenced because they can see where they are going. But also that other element, that leadership, is about relationship. So we are influenced by the relationship because we trust. How do you build trust? You consistently demonstrate behaviors that people will buy into. You walk the talk. You act as a role model. By doing that, and by having key people who are doing that, your leadership team, for example, or supervisors, team leaders, etc., who are walking the talk, they become influential. Where you become influential, you're reducing resistance. The more you reduce resistance in the most people, then people start to do what you want. Almost to the point where they're doing it without thinking. They just do. They never question anymore. They just follow. Whether they're following you or whether they're following the people that follow you, well, that doesn't make any difference, really. It's who are they following and what are they following? Are they doing what you need and what you want? So the art of influence is deep. It's complicated. But on one level, it's relatively straightforward, and most people are familiar with it, is walk the talk. For those that are interested, there is lots of models out there. Probably the most popular is known as the 6 weapons of influence. I have to put a bit of a kind of claim in here, or a kind of disclaimer in here, because they could also be called the 6 weapons of manipulation and potentially the 6 weapons of coercion. So the 6 weapons of influence, a well-known piece of work by a guy called Dr. Robert Cialdini, a social psychologist. This has been going for years. He originally wrote the book, The Art of Persuasion. And then he updated the book with a much better title, because actually it wasn't about persuasion, it was about influence. And the title of the book was called Pre-Suasion. Before persuasion is necessary, before resistance. And he identified 6 of the kind of key psychological, some these days we call them hacks, that we can use to help build influence. I'm going to go through them very quickly now. Go and read up to get the depth of them, because on the surface, again, they can actually seem quite manipulative. But here they are: reciprocity. So reciprocity is just the idea of give and you will receive. Give someone something, you create the psychological desire in them to want to return the favor. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, vice versa. So reciprocity says, well, then give. Now, I could give you something physical. I could give you a pen to write with. It may or may not be useful. If it's useful, then that increases the desire to give something back. But even if it's not useful, just the mere fact that you've given to me creates a desire in me to want to give something back. So whether you're giving time, whether you're giving skill or expertise or knowledge or help or support, what is it that you give to people? Because once you give it, you create the desire in others. Then cynically, I'm going to say this, you can recall it. Now, I'm not going to say you owe me. What I am going to say is you could help me. So when you need that reciprocation there, you built up the bank of giving. People want to give back. If you give to me, you need to realize that actually there's a bit of an itch now that I need to scratch, which is I want to return something. So if you can help me tell you, if you can say, look, you can help me by doing this, I'll be more than happy to get rid of the debt. So we work around reciprocity. It's very powerful. So it sounds quite cynical and clinical, but it's not. It's an emotional need in us to give and to return. Consistency is pretty straightforward. We've talked about consistency already. It's just being consistent in your behaviors. You become influential through consistency. Cialdini talks about consistency and commitment in the same kind of bracket. So commit and then be consistent in fulfilling your commitments. And by doing so, you will get reciprocity so that people then will also commit and be consistent in their commitments to you. If you want commitment from people, start small. Never ask someone to commit, in a really big way straight away. This is, again, one step at a time. This is all a journey. But once you start getting small commitments from people, they want to be seen as being consistent in their commitments. We can then start to build. So to get people to do what you want, get people to do something that's really easy that you want, that they're going to say yes to. Build upon that, and the more yeses, the more times that they do that, the more you're able to build a higher level, and they will want to remain consistent with that commitment. Social proof is based around the majority. So you've only got a social media. There's a YouTube video that's been going for years now. You may or may not have heard of. It's often titled "Leadership Lessons from a Dancing Guy." Go and have a look at it. But it's a good example of social proof. So social proof. What are the majority doing? This is the cultural discussion as well. Social proof is about getting people on board so that they then get their people on board and everyone gets things on board. So what is socially acceptable to do? What is the right thing to do? What is it that people want to do? Get the numbers and you get to what they call a tipping point where everyone will then start to follow. Likability, pretty straightforward. Likability, are you likable? I mean, lots of nice people, likable people, and then I see them at work and I see them in a management role, for example, and they're not particularly likable. That becomes difficult. Are you likable at work? Likable a person as you may be, are you likable at work? And if not, then that's going to be much more difficult to influence. Authority, again, we are hardwired for authority. Authority is something that most of us know quite well. But authority is not just about telling people what to do and kind of, waving a big stick. Authority is about the way you look, the way you hold yourself, the way you sound, the confidence levels that you have, etc. Exerting authority when authority is not being looked for, if you see what I mean, is what's important here. So I don't need to exert my authority in a particular time. I need to just behave with authority consistently. Even when people are not looking. I show authority, people see. And scarcity is based on the idea of what is scarce is of value, like a diamond, I guess. So what can you provide people that is scarce? So this ties into reciprocity. So this is where we go into a loop. Reciprocity, what is scarce? Time might be scarce, knowledge might be scarce, or experience or expertise. So if you can help provide things that someone doesn't have, then you start to become highly influential. So go have a look at the 6 weapons of influence, as influence is something you would like to develop and encourage, because essentially influence is that way beyond process to start getting people to do what you want. The last thing I'm going to go very quickly is just a very quick 3-step model that has a lot of depth. And without going into kind of detail on it, I just want you to get the concept before I leave you in a couple of minutes. So if there's one thing perhaps you could do to change behavior, to get people to do things in a different way, to do what you want. Number 1, focus on the thinking that's driving the behavior, not the behavior. So it's like kids, is we often kind of go, you know, little Johnny, don't do that, Johnny, do this. I get it, but it's not really going to work long term. What we have to do is to understand the thinking that's driving the behavior. We can guess at the thinking, we can observe what we see in terms of behavior, and that might tell us what people are thinking. It's a start, but it's not that accurate. Particularly when we're talking about adults, the only thing really we need to do is to sit down and have the conversation is, why do you do what you do? Or why do you not do what I'm asking you to do? You've got to have that conversation. This is a huge area within itself, is that ability to have open, transparent conversations to understand why people are doing what they're doing, so that we can then go to stage 2, which is empathy. What we're talking about here is non-judgment. I get why you do what you do. You do what you do for your own good reason. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand it. At this point, I can then tell you to go and do something different, but you're going to go back to square one then. What I can do then, once empathy is in place, once someone believes that they have understood, or that I have understood what they're trying to say, I can just think about shifting the thinking. I can ask someone to think about it from a different perspective. There's lots of models to do that. Again, unfortunately, we don't have the time now, but if you can just think about, how do I get them to think differently? So you might get them to think about your perspective. You might get them to think about how someone else is seeing that situation. You might have the conversation about different ways we can all think about a situation. You're just thinking differently. And where you change thinking, you can change thinking from negative to positive. What don't you like? What would you like? Question. If you can shift the thinking, you increase the chances of shifting behavior dramatically. And it's behavior that tends to stick because it's based on their thinking. They have chosen to change their behavior. They haven't been forced to change the behavior. So the most important element here is to recognize that people do things for their own good reason. They're not following you. They're not doing what you want because they think differently. There's a better way and there's a reason for why they do what they do. You need to understand that. Folks, we have run out of time. I'm very conscious we're about 8 minutes over, but as you know, that last thought, I hope that gives you something to think about. I hope some of the things we've talked about have given you something to think about. I'm not sure if we got all the objective models. By all means, contact Lighthouse and they will have a list of those objective acronyms, is that what they're called? So if you are kind of going, yeah, but what is WHOOP? Then give us a shout and we can let you know. Otherwise, folks, thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day and your week, and maybe give it some thought in terms of some of the things that we talked about today. Thanks all. Take care, and hopefully we'll catch you on a CITB course in the near future. Take care all.